Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Tier List channel, also known as Mikoi. Thank you so much for joining back to the channel. It's so great to see you again. And today we are going to be ranking Thomas the Tank Engine movies, proving once and for all that I will never grow up, I will stay a child forever. So, Thomas the Tank Engine. This is one of the first childhood shows that I grew up with. I I was obsessed with this show. I was obsessed with this blue train and his wacky adventures across the island of Sodor. And I have followed every single one of his movies all the way to the end, and that's why. And then the reboot happened, and I stopped following afterwards because the reboot is quite clearly Mattel's way of saying F you to every single Thomas fan that ever existed. But we're not here to talk about the reboot because that isn't what's showing on our list. Today we're going to be ranking the 14 movies that have been produced by Thomas the Tank Engine, starting from Thomas and the Magic Railroad and up to Big World, Big Adventures. Now, to clarify, I know some people are going to be comparing this to, say, the Unlucky Tug's review of all the movies in his ranking video, which I highly personally recommend in checking out if you want a full detailed explanation on every single movie beat by beat. However, this is going to be my personal opinion, so take this with a grain of salt. And I have watched all these movies, many of them repeatedly, many of them multiple times. So I have a clear understanding in every single movie and how much it personally relates to me, but also, as a general movie on its own, how well it stands up. And here's the tier ranking right here. So let's get started. Starting off with Thomas and the Magic Railroad. This was the last movie I ever watched in my Thomas movie marathon, and I gotta say, to end things off in the big theatrical release of Thomas the Tank Engine, it was kind of a flop. I think I speak for everyone. If I speak for every Thomas movie that ever said about this film, it's a mess. It's a mess of a movie. Thomas was barely featured in any. It was more focused towards the human drama, which I know Britt Allcroft wanted to do, and Thomas was basically the driving force, no pun intended, to market this movie into a big scale global release. And a lot of people now associate are in the know of Thomas. Thomas exploded in popularity because of its movie, but in terms of that, probably derailed the franchise, as Unlucky Tug put it. Is a movie though? I think it's fine. I think it's a three-star movie. It's definitely like kerfuffled in some ways, but Thomas is still featured. Dieselton is a memorable villain, and some of the human characters are likable in this. For example, Alec Baldwin as Mr. Conductor, and the rest of the kids as well. Peter Fonda is also really good in his role, but the one who really steals the show is Dieselton. Like, his antics across the engines and the island of Sodor are just phenomenal. Some of the casting choices as the voices of the engines are pretty spot on, with the exception of James. Like, I kind of didn't like him being portrayed in a more feministic role, but hey, James has got to be the token obscure, quote unquote gay character, but I don't really think he's. It's gonna get into a whole can of worms. But honestly, Thomas and the Magic Railroad is a fine movie as it is. It really screwed over the reputation of this franchise as from a realistic show with a lot of realism put into it, into a magic show because trains can talk because magic, etc., etc. So yeah, Thomas and the Magic Railroad is a fine enough movie, but it's basically like the perfect threshold for mid in terms of Thomas movies, because the rest start to follow really vary from good to bad. Next up is Calling All Engines. Calling All Engines. Wouldn't you believe that this was the second movie they ever did? I sure didn't. I used to really like. This was an obscure one. Like, I had to really find this movie as a kid because it came around the time of season 8, season 9, and this movie came out at that time. So I was like, oh gosh, that's a new Thomas movie. I've never seen that footage before. As an avid watcher of Thomas the Tank Engine, I was like, that doesn't exist. As a kid, I was quick to point out that fo- those scenes don't exist. And I that just learned, and then I learned, and that it came from Calling All Engines, which is a movie I never saw as a kid. But as an adult, now viewing this movie, it's all right. Again, it, the one nitpick I have is those educational learning segments that go on for way too long. I feel like if they just, it is a kids movie. It is a kids movie first and foremost. So any adults are gonna see like, oh, this thing is boring. These educational learning segments go on way too long, and it could have been fine. It could have been fine as like a separate thing, but it's integral to the plot. The learning segments, they actually like added into the overarching story of Calling All Engines, which, by the way, but if you take out those learning segments, the story's actually pretty good. It's basically Thomas's way of tackling racism in its own universe. The whole Steamies versus Diesels conflict, and there are some Diesels who are nice, and those are Steamies who are angry. Both sides are both portrayed in the right and wrong, and I like that. I like that Thomas is kind of like the mediator for all this in order to build this airport. The goal is very simple. It's just to build this airport. However, the real takeaway from this movie is the conflict between Steamies versus Diesels. And you can show that Diesels can be nice and Steamies can get mean. It's not apples to apples in that situation. And it is a good movie, but I wouldn't call it better because of those learning segments. I wouldn't call it better than Magic Railroad, but it is something worth talking about. There are funny segments of this too. I like the part where Emily gets shunted off because, oh no, I like the part where Emily gets her own berth in the shed. That was a nice reveal. Of course, spoilers for this movie. For all these movies, if you haven't seen them, go watch them. They're all a recommendation, even though they're good or bad. It's just a fascinating watch to see all these Thomas movies. But points aside, Calling All Engines is a pretty mid movie. The learning segments really killed it off, but the conflict itself is good. Dieselton, of course, makes his next appearance here, and he's more toned down than he was in Magic Railroad. I definitely like his performance more in Magic Railroad, but Calling All Engines shows a more nicer side, in quotes. So yeah, Calling All Engines, it's something worth watching. Just skip on the learning segments because they ultimately don't matter in the end. What matters is the conflict. Next up is The Great Discovery. Oh boy, this one's a childhood favorite. This honestly is one of my favorite childhood movies of all time. I have such a nostalgic attachment to this movie because it looks awesome. Um, and as an adult, it holds up. It's a really, really good movie, and it holds up. This is a great movie to show to kids, like who want if shows can teach you like responsibility and how much it goes in your head and wanting to shut out this new guy who's going to help you on your well, basically the plot of this movie is that Thomas discovers a city called Great Waterton and is basically mayor of that city, controlling all the responsibility and basically making sure that Great Waterton is good and prepped up and ready to go for the grand opening. So they introduced this new character called Stanley, who basically usurps Thomas as mayor, and Thomas just feels jealous. He feels threatened. And Thomas actually like goes through an arc, which is fantastic because, he starts off like, I achieved this role and I want myself to get all the credit. Screw that white engine called Stanley. Like, he doesn't deserve this. I deserve this. So, yeah, Thomas he's like a child that just holds on to that toy, won't share its newfangled toy with the new kid. So yeah, Thomas becomes unlikable. He makes a lot of mistakes. He even crashes in a spectacular crash scene, the Great Waterton Tower crash. That was spectacular, even back then. And so you feel sympathy for Thomas later on because he knows he's screwed up, and so he hides, and everyone kept looking for Thomas. And yeah, the movie itself is fantastic. It also brings back every single like model series character, which is I find amazing. And the songs, they're very integral to that. They're very integral in showcasing each character's emotions. And the narrator, narrated by Pierce Brosnan, is fantastic. Pierce Brosnan does a fantastic role. I wish he could have been narrator for season 11 and 12, but unfortunately, Hit Entertainment wasn't didn't have that rights anymore to Pierce, and they just cut him out. But this movie is fantastic. This movie is fantastic. This is absolutely fantastic. Giving it its props a 5-star category, a 5-star tier. Great Discovery is worth the watch, ladies and gentlemen. I highly recommend you watch Great Discovery. If you want a true Thomas movie, don't go watching Magic Railroad. Go watch the Great Discovery. If you want just classic model series Thomas, this is also the final model series Thomas episode, and they really went all out with this. And again, this is just a fantastic movie. I have no more words to say. Go watch it. Next up is Hero of the Rails, from the final model series to the first ever CGI production of Thomas the Tank Engine. This one was another elusive movie because I saw this movie advertised everywhere. Like, it was on the website a lot, it was on TV adverts a lot, and I really, really want to go to see this movie. I eventually saw some clips on YouTube, so I kind of got the gist of the movie. But when I actually go watch the movie in full, I realized it's a freaking great movie. This movie, you can hate on the Sharon Miller era. You can hate CGI Thomas. But their first production, they hit it off with a bang, ladies and gentlemen. Like, Hero of the Rails is fantastic. You would never think a movie this good came out of this era of Thomas, where a lot of people started to tune out of Thomas. Fortunately, I stayed, and goddamn, I really enjoyed Hero of the Rails. I'm gonna put it below Great Discovery because there are some nitpicks that I have. For example, the narrator, he didn't really need to talk that much. Again, this is I agree with Unlucky Tug here. The narrator didn't need to talk that much for this movie, but when it's time for them to showcase their characters and just them talking, the character interactions are what Thomas does great with character interactions, and this one was definitely part of that. And when Hero of the Rails hails, the character interaction between Thomas and Hero is so good. The voice actors really carried, especially Heroes. He's a fantastic voice actor. Um, he brings to life this engine who was just he came from Japan, he came to Sodor for work, and then he was abandoned, and then Thomas finally discovers him, and Thomas and Hero shared this special relationship that is ultimately carried out for the entirety of the series. Even Big World of Big Adventures did a whole saga of it. Um, yeah, you can never get rid of Hero after that. And Spencer is, of course, show stealer, villain, absolute villain. Out of Spencer is fantastic. Just the camaraderie between Thomas and the Steam team to help out Hero is also really great. And yeah, I really enjoyed this movie. I wish the narrator spoke less. But again, if you want to show your kids another fantastic Thomas movie, Hero of the Rails is not bad at all to show to your kids. It is a great movie. Next up, oh boy, from movies I can easily recommend to kids to ones I don't. These next movies, you can watch this drunk and you can just laugh at these movies. These are movies that are so bad it's good, but when you're into it with a thinking mind, you're going to absolutely hate them. Let's start off with Misty Island Rescue. Good God, did this movie suck? And I remember this movie was hyped up a lot back in the day, but man, this movie sucked. The, I cannot believe Thomas is annoying. He's unlikable in this. Um, Bash Dash and Ferdinand, I hate these characters. I don't like the logging locals. I hate the layout of Misty Island. It looks neat, but they didn't take it far too much. It's just a logging station. That's really only it. And just the character choices in this movie, the motivations for each one. And man, I can annoy you guys with one of the most infamous lines in the entire franchise. I make good decisions, that's what I was told. I will not be fearful, I'll be brave and bold. What the flying frick is that line, and why is it repeated like 27,270 times in this movie? Good God, the rhyming. It is so annoying. Oh, I hate this movie so much. It is unwatchable. Your eyes will hurt. Your ears will bleed. Your brain goes numb. I hate this movie. 1 star. I could even put 0 stars out of Misty Island Rescue. I hate this movie. This is the worst Thomas and Friends movie I have ever seen in my life. Do not go see it unless you were watching it drunk. Then you'll have a good time in interacting with this. Ugh, I do not like this movie. Yeah, this was Sharon Miller at its worst. Next up is Day of the Diesels. I own a DVD of this movie, and I gotta say, why did I pick this one? Okay, Day of the Diesels, though, my god. This one actually does feel, well, okay, but it's not better. It is not better. I do like how it's got a new protagonist in Percy. Percy is a protagonist of all time in this movie. He is a complete idiot. However, he's somewhat likable, I guess. But I just don't like his interact. I just don't like his mindset in this movie. He feels like a complete fool. Um, Diesel Diesel 10 returns and he's back to the conniving side, and I love Diesel 10's portrayal in this movie. There are a couple of positive points. Diesel 10's portrayal is he feels like the mafia boss. He feels like so sinister and so cold and calculating. And he's got that deep voice within him. He's not the goofy ass Diesel 10 that we saw in Magic Railroad. He's much more sinister. He's much more villainy. He works behind the shadows, so to speak. And that's great. And that's great. I wish you could have had Diesel as well. I wish you could have had Diesel have a more prominent role in that, considering, he was the original cold, calculating heel that he was in past Thomas seasons. But Diesel 10 having this role is great. And of course, the filler Diesels that are Norman, Paxton, Sydney, Den, Dart, blah blah blah. They're fine. They're fine as like cronies. And yeah, this definitely portrays Steamies versus Diesels wrong. This wasn't calling all engines, where it's more vague whether you know who's in the right and wrong. I don't like the portrayal of the Diesels versus Steamies conflict here. I don't, because it really portrays Steamies as all good and Diesels as all bad. And the way the ending worked, the way they tried to take over the Steamworks is so stupid. It's like, okay, we took over the Steamworks. We hate the Diesel Works, and now we try to take over the Steamworks, and now we're just gonna have to play around with it and have fun at it. They're not gonna like take over Tidmouth Sheds or anything. I don't know. I don't know. It's wasted potential, the movie. I like it better than Mystery Island Rescue, but I don't like it better as much. So yeah, Day of the Diesels. Kind of also Belle and Flynn make cameos. They're just there to sell toys, guys. They're just there to sell toys. Okay, after two meh movies, and then we got two great movies, and then we got two bad movies. Let's move on now to some inconsistencies. Let's move on to some actual like movies with substance. Starting off, Blue Mountain Mystery. Blue Mountain Mystery saw the return of the narrow gauge engines, which are a welcome addition to the CGI cast. And they look great. They look awesome. They look tiny, but they're all in their unique character. Scarloy is no longer the child that he was in late model season Thomas. He actually feels like the leader of the pack, and I love his voice. I love his voice. It's so deep. It's so manly. He almost well done, Thomas. Ha ha ha! Marvelous. It's great. It's great. And I like the conflict. I like this movie a lot. Especially on the second rewatch. Like, Thomas feels like a perspective character, which I adore. The whole setting of the Blue Mountain, Blue Ridge Mountains, is great. And Luke is a sympathetic character. There are times where I found Luke kind of annoying in this movie, especially towards the end with the whole like falling out stuff and whatnot. But it is totally justifiable once you actually delve into Luke's backstory and all that. How Diesel plays a very very sinister role, and Paxton, who was a background character in Day of the Diesels, actually gets a pretty significant role here, and now he's one of the more memorable characters in Thomas because of that. I enjoyed Paxton's role. He's kind of a bumbling idiot, and I like his character a lot. And of course, it is kind of a sad movie as well once you consider Luke and his tragic backstory, and his relationship with Victor is great. Is really great, and I love how they gave Victor a backstory, which to me feels right. As someone who is like, oh, Victor's kind of a non exclusive character. Does he have some sort of motivation why he's decided to stay at the Steamworks and why he came to Sodor in the first place? They gave him a backstory here, and it's great. So yeah, I really like Blue Mountain Mystery. The climax scene was a little dumb, but it's nice. It's a nice movie. I'm gonna put it right here. I know Unlucky Tug ranked this first, along with another movie that's on here, but I find it okay. But I find it good, just not top of tier good. Good, but it is a pretty good movie. It's got great pacing. It's got pretty good character interactions between the narrow gauge and Thomas. A lot of people say the narrow gauge engines were kind of unlikable in the last movie, but it's totally justified in that regard. So yeah, I really like Blue Mountain Mystery. It's just not going up there in the top tier. Next up is King of the Railway. King of the Railway is an underrated movie, to say the least. I enjoyed King of the Railway far more than I should. So this one was one of the first productions in the Brenner era of Thomas, and I gotta say, the way this movie is structured is pretty good. It's pretty good. And it was kind of it's starting to grow its growing pains a bit. There were some CGI moments, CGI effects that I don't really mesh well. Some of the characters' faces, their movements is kind of off-putting for some scenes, but for most scenes it's pretty good. Jack and the Pack return, and they all look sleek as hell. Thomas James and Percy, of course, get pretty prominent roles, rebuilding Ulfstead Castle and whatnot. And Steven, can I just say, Steven is a fantastic character. he belongs in the world of Thomas. Like the rocket, the rocket backstory is great. Um, the tunnel scene is pretty good. But I just love the interactions between Thomas and Steven a lot. They're so fun. Thomas is like, oh, he's kind of like he's always this child of wonder, and Steven is this old fart that just has a spring in his step. Is great. I don't like it as much as Blue Mountain Mystery. However, I am gonna put it in 4 star. It's in a low 4 star rank because I really enjoyed King of the Railway. I think it's an underrated movie, but hey, a lot of people say that a lot of these movies are pretty underrated. And here we go. Here we go. Some of the fan favorite movies have come in this list. Starting off with Tale of the Brave. Tale of the Brave is a movie I have rewatched so many times. It's actually one of my most like rewatchable movies in the whole Thomas library because it's awesome. Like Tale of the Brave is great. Percy actually feels like a believable protagonist. Day of the Diesels kind of squandered Percy's potential as a main lead. Tale of the Brave, Percy is the true protagonist in this one, and he's great. Like he feels the most diverse. He actually goes through a believable character arc that not a lot of engines go through. His fear of monsters, and Thomas being this conflicted character of, oh, I saw something. I saw this thing that could be a monster. So he Percy believes Thomas in his quest for the monster, but when Thomas actually confirms that, you know, it's not really a monster, he tries to protect, the secret to Percy, but when Percy comes around and, you know, Percy confines in Thomas to defend him, Thomas isn't so sure, and Percy kind of shuts him out. As their friendship is really tested in this one. If you want something that really tests Thomas and Percy's relationship, this one is the perfect one. James, of course, being this antagonist is really funny. It is a really funny role for James, and it kind of fits in his character. You know, he wants to pay Thomas out, basically. And Percy, in a long time, for trying to apologize to Percy in this movie is pretty great. I love the character of Gator. Gator is fantastic as a side best friend to Percy, basically confiding in him and not wanting him to leave is great. Percy's whole arc is fantastic, and of course the movie is pretty like it's it has a lot of action into it. That scene with Cranky was legitimately like heart stopping. It was thrilling, and of course the ending is a very very thrilling action scene that not a lot of movies do, and it actually brings up some tense. It brings up some hype. The monster being revealed as this dinosaur print is fantastic. Yeah, and it just shows the strengths of all three of the main leads. It is a fantastic movie, and I urge go people watch it. It is better than Hair of the Rails, but in terms of nostalgic, I think I prefer Great Discovery. But Tale of the Brave is just good enough that I place it as my you know at this point my number two. But it is a definite 5 star. I hope you guys go watch it. Tale of the Brave, must watch for Thomas fans. And now, Adventure Begins. Adventure Begins. It's no secret. This is my favorite Thomas movie of all time because it's basically a remake. It's basically a remake of the 7 stories from Wilbert Awdry's books, or if you're me, the first 8 episodes of the original show from season 1. Just more ordered structurally as the books. And I wish this was the theatrical movie we got rather than Magic Railroad. I wish The Adventure Begins was the theatrical release of Thomas that we got because It actually shows like Thomas's backstory. Gordon and Edward's relationship at the beginning was strong. Henry's tunnel incident was um, pretty good, and then James, of course, in his original color, and Thomas's in his original Brighton colors is fantastic. I really enjoyed The Adventure Begins from start to finish. This is a movie I've rewatched hundreds and hundreds of times, and I never got tired of it. Um, it is a great movie. It is a great movie, and I wholeheartedly you guys go watch The Adventure Begins. Um, this is a great movie. This is a great movie. This is a 2015 was such a good year for Thomas because we already had The Adventure Begins, but they just had to one up themselves with Thomas and Friends Legend of the Lost Treasure. Legend of the Lost Treasure feels like a movie. Like it's a movie that it's actually can be presented in cinemas because it's great. Again, another movie that I can wholeheartedly agree with the Thomas community that this movie is great. Ryan is the only nitpick I really have in this movie. He's kind of the Stanley 2.0 in this movie, um, where Thomas actually feels threatened by a new engine. Why? As for something he discovered. It's basically a great discovery again, but this time with a lot more action into it. Like Sailor John being the antagonist and a human antagonist, that's never been done in Thomas. And I feel like it works very effectively because they're very powerless to do it. The trains could easily crush the humans, but what not? Why not? They can't do anything to fight back because the trains are also nice. But yeah, Legends of the Lost Treasure is a movie that is built for cinemas, and it is great. I would put it above Great Discovery. It is a fantastic movie. Also, the songs are pretty like memorable. Especially, we saw the appearance of the Arlesdale engines are a great nod to a great wink wink to the Railway series fans. That is great. I like how Topham is like mad at Thomas. Like he really shows his authority against Thomas. Like you don't. That is an engine that has messed up so many times, and he's at his wits' end with Thomas a lot in this movie. And the symbolism of the number one being scraped off to show that Thomas really fucked up, and getting it back in the climax is pretty great. Skiff did as well as a sidekick, and yeah, everything in this movie just works except for Ryan. But everything in this movie just works. Even the cameos of Donald and Douglas are in this movie. And what's not to say about nostalgic? So yeah, Legend of the Lost Treasure, fantastic movie. I just barely don't prefer it over The Adventure Begins, but it is still like a fantastic movie. I hope people go watch it. It's a refreshing take on Thomas. Next up is The Great Race from 2016. The Great Race is Miss Potential the movie. While I do like it for, it is a modern Thomas movie, so the animation looks pretty good. It's just the story itself is a lot of missed potential. Why do I say that? Because A, it's already been done before. Thomas wanting to be faster, stronger, better. That's already done in an episode. It's called Dream On from season 10 or 11. That's already been done. So there's no point in rooting for Thomas. He's kind of an unlikable protagonist as well because he shuns down Ashita, who is the female engine seen in the cover. He's kind of an ass towards her. Um, So yeah, I don't like Thomas in this movie. He feels kind of a wimp as well. But most of the engines in this movie is most of the engines are just cookie cutter. Most of them, at least, because the big selling point in this movie is the Flying Scotsman and its debut in the Thomas lore, where it's very, very feels warranted. It does feel warranted, and I really, really wish this could have been done better with a better protagonist in this movie. They could have done so much more if Gordon was the protagonist in this movie instead of Thomas. Now, granted, Thomas could just be a side character. He could just join the little shunting show. He could be the B plot. He could easily be the B plot in this movie. Gordon should be the protagonist in this movie because he has the story. He has the big overhaul as the shooting star. He has the rivalry with Flying Scotsman. He competes in the great race itself, and yet we're focusing on Thomas and his little shunting expedition. Just him and his escapades into the Great Railway Show. Really? You've got your star attraction here. Let Gordon have his own movie. It could have worked so well as a Gordon story, but no, it's a Thomas story for that. But the songs are great. Will You Won't You is still hummable. Like, won't you take me to the Great Railway Show? Or it's a hummable song. Streamlining is of course streamlining, and yeah, some of the movies, even Diesel song is like pretty hummable. That's not to say that some of these movies aren't bad. So the action scenes are pretty cool. The Great Railway Show itself is, a thing that happens, but it comes in so late that it really doesn't warrant much attention. So yeah, I don't like the Great Race as much. It could have been good. It could have been even mid, but it's just nah. Disappointing. Disappointing is what I call this movie. Disappointing. Next is Journey Beyond Sodor, the first movie to feature bouncing. The engines like gesturing and making all these bouncing effects, which a lot of people didn't like, but in this movie, it wasn't egregious. It's definitely not as egregious as like what what came after it, but Journey Beyond Sonor, I really like this movie, guys. I do. This movie is pretty good. Although there are a lot of missed potential moments in this one. First of all, the experimental engines scene wasn't particularly nice. I would have preferred it if they just kept it as Thomas and Merlin, have the other two just meh. Frankie and Hurricane are pretty interesting villains, and the solar power plant is a threatening location, and it's basically Thomas being trapped in this prison of a place while he's being held hostage. It's a nice story for Thomas, and it really misses the tradition of missing home and wanting to be with his friends. It's a great little moral and a great little thing to come about with this movie. James is also pretty fantastic in his role as a side character. He's kind of a Dio Tarragonus, really showing his creative side and his more side to his quirky side. His quirky side, not really his much vain side. It's just more quirky in this movie, and it's great. This movie is great. Definitely. This is top of the 4-star lines. I don't necessarily put it at 5-star because there are some scenes that are like, whatever. Um, but yeah, I appreciate what Journey Beyond Soda tried to do. If you view it as a finale movie to the entire Thomas franchise, you will absolutely love it. But otherwise, it's okay. It's definitely good. It's a good watching experience. And finally, we come to Big World, Big Adventures. This was the big killer of Thomas as we know it. Like, this era of Thomas, we've successfully transitioned out of the Brenner era with Journey Beyond Sodor, and now Big World, Big Adventures. This movie kind of sucks. This movie kind of sucks. This was Thomas, once again, kind of an lead. Again, Thomas being the lead in most of these movies is starting to kill the hype. And this one was definitely bad. This was definitely a bad showcase of that. Some of the locations look very barren. For example, Brazil and India. I they look very stereotypical, and America especially looks like a huge desert. There's nothing interesting about America but a huge desert, apparently. Nia. is a cool side character to have around, cool to tag along. Ace, the sports car, was a neat little antagonist. It's definitely showing that Thomas has a. It kind of reminds me of that SpongeBob episode, The Hot Shot, with the famous race car driver's son. Um, where Thomas is this gullible little guy, and Ace wants to show him around the world, but it turns out he's a bad influence. It is pretty good, and Thomas and Nia definitely have their strong friendship in this one, and you could argue that they're a couple in this movie. But yeah, again, this movie kind of sucks. Like, it's not a very good way to display the new era of Thomas. They definitely did better with Big World Big Adventures this seasons as they progressed, but in terms of introducing that idea, it's not a very good movie. So yeah, that is my official ranking of all the Thomas movies. I hope you enjoyed them. These are all my opinion, first and foremost. And let me know down in the comments below what would be your ranking of your Thomas movies. Which one is your favorite Thomas movie? And would you like to see a Thomas movie again in the future? I know that they're doing a theatrical release of Thomas, but until we get further announcements of that, will hopefully be very soon. So thank you guys so much for watching. Please like this video, leave a comment, subscribe for more. Keep notifying the bell so you won't miss a new video once they come out. And I'll see you next time when we eventually do another tier list of this. Probably more Thomas related stuff. I don't know. I like talking about Thomas, so maybe I'll do another tier list at some point, but maybe not Thomas because these are all movies that I cherish. So thank you guys for watching. This has been Mikoi signing out.